A conception of spirituality is indispensable to acquire a holistic perspective on the films of Andrei Tarkovsky. Unlike any other filmmaker of his generation, Tarkovsky's films invent a language of the spirit through the poetry of cinematic images, as opposed to the genre of religious films, which deal with the role of religion in the lives of people. The spiritual cinema of Tarkovsky is about interior terrains, where a person is one with oneself, where faith is not about making public declarations of belief, but more about waiting for the miracle to happen, a miracle that occurs on the borders of invisible realms and can be felt rather than logically deciphered. The poetry for which he is celebrated in the way he made his 7 films, beginning with Ivan's childhood to his last movie, The Sacrifice, before he died of lung cancer in the same year, cannot be separated from questions he asks with regard to the spiritual endeavor which aspires to make man more perfect. In Tarkovsky, spirituality is not so much about Christianity, which served as a leitmotif to his work, or about institutional religion, as much as it is about how we go through our life on earth, which is a journey of spirit more than anything else. Art, the individual, and the life of the spirit are interconnected in his work, whether in Andrei Rublev, the 15th century icon painter who must believe before he can be creative, Solaris, a film about the anxieties that knowledge produces when you have to face your real self, or the quest for redemption in Stalker and Nostalgia. In the beginning was the Word. Why is that, Papa? The poignant last line of the movie The Sacrifice that Tarkovsky dedicated to his son with hope and confidence. What in the discourse of a rationalist is the accident of birth an inexplicable coincidence that it is not necessary for one to pry into, for Tarkovsky is the miracle that constitutes life in a broad sense. To embrace that which looks like a coincidence as miracle is what faith is all about. The spiritual landscapes in Tarkovsky are deeply private worlds, not the domain of symbols and metaphors, attempting to impress the audience with their sense of grandeur and becoming, as Robinson points out in the sacred cinema of Tarkovsky, no other filmmaker uses rain, water, fire, or flight in the same idiosyncratic, hypnotic, and profound way as Andrei Tarkovsky. Yet, Tarkovsky denies that these elements are symbols. He dislikes symbols, metaphors, and parables. He acknowledges the power of dreams, the occurrence of miracles, the movement of inanimate objects, and the existence of God. But he denies symbols and metaphors. Tarkovsky goes accurately by the observation that the language of spirit is in the very nature of things. The miracle is an epiphany that is invisible for all practical purposes, and the image stands at the borders of the invisible. To achieve life breathing through the frame, Tarkovsky films motion, grass, trees, clouds blowing in the breeze and running water. The soundtrack emphasizes motion, dripping, creaking, rustling, the noises of nature on the move, a world that never keeps still. Even when Tarkovsky's frame seemed to be static, the soundtrack evokes emotion. Robert Bresson once wrote, "To translate the invisible wind by the water, it sculpts in passing." This is precisely what Tarkovsky tries to do, to depict the invisible by showing what it touches and moves. The invisible in Tarkovsky's philosophical cinema is the spiritual, the divine, the unknown, and unknowable. Faith is an affirmation of the miraculous, that which is invisible and everywhere at any point in time, provided you make the choice to see what is plain to the eye of the spirit. Speaking of his last film, The Sacrifice, Tarkovsky says, "Has man any hope of survival in the face of all patent signs of impending apocalyptic silence?" Perhaps an answer to that question is to be found in the legend of the endurance of the parched tree, deprived of the water of life, on which I base this film, and which has such a crucial place in my artistic biography. The monk, step by step and bucket by bucket, carried water up the hill to water the dry tree, believing implicitly that his act was necessary, and never for an instant wavering in his belief in the miraculous power of his own faith in God. He lived to see the miracle. One morning the tree burst into life, its branches covered with young leaves, and that miracle is surely no more than the truth. Hope is waiting, the same word which means both being and doing, in the spirit of unlimited patience for the miracle to happen. The existence of the human person has no other meaning for Tarkovsky except to hope. Hope for the miracle, like the monk in the story taking the bucket up the hill each morning of each day of his life to water the dry tree. The moment of liberation is when you know there's more to life than what the body endures or mind suffers every day. Tarkovsky's religious cinema does not depict God, but does reveal a world in which the unknown is not in the next country or the next town, but right here, in this building, in this room. The unknown is you, and everything that passes through you, for which there is no language, except that of the spirit. No matter under what ideological baggage we attempt to hide, whether we call ourselves religious or non-religious, Tarkovsky makes us aware of our individual responsibility towards life, the life around us, in the deepest sense possible. The type of responsibility can only be spiritual, because it is a commitment that transcends the limits that time imposes on human beings. Though Tarkovsky's movies are deeply religious, it is the spiritual sense that we need to analyze his work, especially in a time period where both religion and spirituality have been discredited. In the cinema of Tarkovsky, the spirit is removed of all abstractions and revealed in its concrete forms, as the sacred always manifests itself as a reality of a wholly different order from natural realities. The concreteness of the sacred is not in the realm of ideas. The spiritual alone is the actual. It is essence, or that which has been in itself. It is that which relates itself to itself and is determinate. It is other being and being for self, and in this determinateness, or in its self-externality, abides within itself. In other words, it is in and for itself. Tarkovsky's understanding of the spirit is closer to Eliade than to Hegel. The sacred tree, the sacred stone, are not adored as stone or tree. They are worshipped precisely because they show something that is no longer stone or tree, but the sacred. When do the stone or the tree stop being stone or tree and enter the domain of the sacred? The transition from the material to the spiritual does not take away the quintessence of the object. It enhances the object's character and brings out its essential nature. Something has to be more than itself for it to be itself. Something has to move out of time into eternity. The object abandons the condition of finitude in order to become infinite, a process that gives birth to the image. As Tarkovsky puts it, the artistic image is always a metonym, where one thing is substituted for another, the smaller for the greater. To tell of what is living, the artist uses something dead. To speak of the infinite, he shows the finite. Substitution is when the infinite cannot be made into matter, but it is possible to create an illusion of the infinite. That illusion is the image. The artist shows the finite in order to point toward the infinite. Through the image, the artist creates an illusion of the infinite. Philosophical investigations note that where our language suggests a body and there is none, there we should like to say is a spirit. At any point in time, the body is an absence, because it has either receded into the past or is lingering in the future. To deal with this paradox of time, the one has to confess that what exists in the eternal present, or the infinite, is the spirit and not the body. Through the image is sustained an awareness of the infinite, the eternal within the finite, the spiritual within matter, the limitless given form. Language suggests a body or the finite. The infinite is the language of spirit and is discovered through the body or the finite. The spirit speaks the language of the commonplace or the ordinary experience that opens the doors to the infinite. Sean Martin says that in the Oriental tradition, obviously, finite things such as the corner of a room or the view from a window represented the infinite. In the context of the films, it could be that Tarkovsky senses a numinous quality in the everyday or forgotten corners of our lives. Hence his fascination with still lives like the teacups on the table in the rain in Solaris, the comb and Bible in Nostalgia, the mirror, cup and stereo in The Sacrifice, to name but three, also echo the painterly device of the memento mori, objects which serve to remind the person contemplating the painting that life is transitory. The language of spirit in Tarkovsky is not about Hegelian abstractions or Kantian subtleties, but enters the practical task of editing. His criticism of the montage cinema is that it appeals to intellectual experience, where the image becomes an end in itself, and the author proceeds to make a total onslaught on the audience, imposing upon them his own attitude to what is happening. This is opposed to the Tarkovsky style of editing, which is sculpting in time. Editing is a spiritual activity because it brings together shots which are already filled with time and organizes the unified, living structure inherent in the film. In the time that pulsates through the blood vessels of the film, making it alive, is of varying rhythmic pressure. Time does not stop being time, but moves into the eternal or the timeless. The image is tied to the concrete and the material, yet reaches out along mysterious paths to regions beyond the spirit. If cinema's destined role is humanity's liberation from finitude, it is, in fact, the destiny of art to speak the language of the infinite and bring the human closer to the spirit. Humanity's needs are material, but its longings are emotional and spiritual. Historical materialism ultimately emerges from a spiritual tradition that rests on notions of justice, equality, and universality, and therefore it appeals to those who suffer oppression in parts of the Third World. In articulating the need for the spiritual liberation of humankind, Tarkovsky dwells on the notion of a complete person, which requires a true sense of your own dignity, an acceptance of the objective value and significance of the I at the center of your life on earth, as it grows in spiritual stature, advancing towards the perfection in which there can be no egocentricity. Tarkovsky's understanding of spirituality removes the emphasis from religion as a way of life to that of individual responsibility in recreating the world, with technologies dedicated to the project of obliterating any trace of individuality, and discussions on religion reduced to ritual, politics, and unreal collective goals. An overpopulated Earth makes it harder to recognize the sanctity of the individual and his or her inner life. This is the context in which we must understand Tarkovsky's work as a whole when he says, "I see it as my duty to stimulate reflection on what is essentially human and eternal in each individual soul." What is missing in the way religion is understood in the 21st century, which is plagued by extremisms of those who have the power and those who do not, is the spirituality that comes with personal commitment to make a better world. Tarkovsky's movies continue to throw light on complex domains in a person's inner life. When you discover the miracle of life each and every day, without which the future becomes as meaningless as the past, such a spiritual life is not abstract and de-individualized, but, contrarily, something that is felt so deeply that it has a transformative impact on the world around you.